Here's the first X1 throwback. The intro animation for this game is the same as Mega Man X1, but it's not X1 we're playing. No, this is Mega Man Zero One for the Game Boy Advance. Yes, after all of those Mega Man playthroughs, I thought I should revisit the Mega Man Zero series because when I was a kid, I had only played Mega Man Zero One on my GBA. And I never really got into the other Zero games because I thought Mega Man Zero One was way too difficult, so I thought the rest of the series was going to be very difficult. And this series is definitely a very difficult series of games. Like, if you want a challenging Mega Man, you've got it right here. And in some cases, I think it kind of oversteps the boundary between difficult and fair, or unfair, I guess. And there are definitely a lot of mistakes, or game design mistakes in Zero One that make it a lot more difficult than it should be for starting players. But because I am most experienced with Zero One, I can deal with most of that. So, this game was actually made by a different company. I think it was co-developed between Capcom and Inti Creates. Inti Creates is known for creating Mega Man ZX later down the line. They made Mega Man 9 and Mega Man 10. And this was actually their third game, like, as a company. This was the third game they ever worked on, and it's their first Mega Man game. So I can forgive many of the mistakes, but it still kind of leads to this long laundry list of complaints I have about Zero One. Even though I can, tolerate it all because I've played this game so much. So this is, we've kind of flown through the intro stage, but this is the intro boss. He's very, very slow, and not a lot of attacks to this one. You basically just have to shoot him with buster pellets until you finally get the Z-Saber from the mysterious guy on the computer screen, which is going to happen in a couple of minutes. If you lose too much health, this will happen automatically, so you can skip this part, which is why the speedrunners want to enter this boss fight with as little health as possible, so they get the saber as quickly as possible. Gee, I wonder who could have given us the saber. I wonder who had it at the end of the X series. Oh no, I've damaged the girl! Oh, that's so unfortunate. So this game has a ranking system, and if you damage the girl, you actually lose points on your ranking, which is funny. But yeah, that's the intro stage. It went by rather quickly. So anyway, the plot of this game is this is set like 100 years after the X series, and Zero has awoken to a world where X is ruling like a tyrant. So over the course of the game, he's going to be taking on missions against X and his army, and we're going to hopefully figure out what went wrong and why X is suddenly a tyrant bent on destroying all Reploids. And the answer to that is that there's actually, this is like so far ahead in the future that there's been like so many apocalypses and stuff. Like, the Mega Man universe goes through apocalypses almost as often as Shin Megami Tensei, and that's saying a lot. So anyways, you can only get into this room if you got an A rank on your latest mission. So that's what is in there. That is the only Cyber Elf that's really the only reward for getting an A rank. Like, I'm jumping all over the place, but with the ranking system, the only real reward for getting an A rank is that one Cyber Elf, and I'll talk about what Cyber Elves are later on. So this is the first real stage. You're going to notice me using the Buster a lot, because in this game, you don't earn weapons from your enemies upon defeating them like in the regular Mega Man games. Instead, you have 4 weapons, but Zero gets better and better at using them as you use them more often. So I'm going to be using the Buster a lot because I want to level it up. And one thing that they don't tell you about the leveling system... Oh, by the way, Cyber Elves are kind of like collectibles, but they're like spread throughout the game. Like, they're hidden in crazy places. Like, there's one right here on the end of a hook. And I'm not actually going to bother picking it up because I'm trying to go through this quickly. So what I did there was, if you hit that little device that's controlling the rain, you can actually control the direction of the rain, and it'll push you in one direction or another. But anyways, Cyber Elves are hidden all throughout the game. There are specific enemies and specific missions that are carrying them, and it gets crazier as we see more of where some of the hidden elves are. So anyways, the way the leveling system works is that, killing enemies will obviously give you EXP, but there are actually certain skills for certain weapons that you can get quicker than others depending on how you use the weapon. So if you use a lot of charge shots with the Buster, you will actually get a upgrade to the charge shot faster than you would if you just use pellets, because if you use pellets, then you will get an upgrade that allows you to have 4 shots on screen faster than the supercharged shot, and I'm trying to get the supercharged shot as quickly as possible. So yeah. Here's the first real boss. His name is Aztec Falcon, and he has the shortest health bar in the entire game. Like, out of all bosses, he's got the shortest health bar. So that should say a lot about boss health bars in this game. And despite being the first boss, he's actually very difficult, because if you try and shoot him with a buster, that little claw that he sticks out in order to fire those attacks, that actually blocks a lot of your shots, and it can be very difficult to get past that with a saber as well. So yeah, this is your intro to Mega Man Zero. This is going to be a difficult one. And on top of all of the difficulties with trying to hit this guy, there's a time limit to it as well, because you have to save the Reploids at the bottom of the screen from getting crushed by the slowly lowering platform with spikes underneath it. This is actually a crazy game, and you know, I'd like to say that the other Zero games get a little bit easier, but yeah, there's a reason they have all those upgrades in the Legacy Collection, like save states and stuff. Well, not exactly save states. Also, if you finish off an enemy with a saber, they get sliced in half completely. You could say they were divided by zero. Yes. So we got a reward for that. We got the Thunder Chip, which will add an elemental attack to our weapons if we equip it. But the element only really applies if you have the charged version of your weapons. Like, you need the fully charged charge shot upgrade in order to actually use the Thunder Chip to its fullest. So that's the reason I want to get the supercharged shot as quickly as possible, so I'm going to be using a lot of charged shots throughout this next mission. And speaking of missions, there's no real stage select in Mega Man Zero 1. I mean, you can choose from a list of missions, but they now unlock in a tree instead of just having like 8 to choose from, which I don't really mind. I think it's actually a pretty good idea. And another interesting thing about Mega Man Zero is this mission actually revisits the intro stage, by the way. Another interesting thing is that most of the areas you go to are linked to each other, like it's a Metroidvania, but you just get teleported to the start of the area anyways, so there's no real reason to, like, do that, unless they wanted to make it possible to backtrack to areas you've already completed for the purposes of maybe collecting a Cyber Elf that you missed on the first time. Like what I'm going to do right here. There's a little nook above this wall here. You have to make a very slick jump in order to get up there. But there's a 1-up, and there's an enemy guarding another Cyber Elf. And this Cyber Elf is actually, well, it's colored red, so it's probably important. The thing about Cyber Elves is, what's really annoying about them is that there are no sub-tanks or heart tanks in Mega Man Zero. Like, at least in the first one. Instead, all of those abilities are tied to Cyber Elves. What a Cyber Elf does is that when you get them, you can equip them and then use their ability, but you can only use them once in the entire game. So there are Cyber Elves that give you a small amount of health, which I will use in this upcoming boss. That is a one-time use thing. I would have to get another elf with the same effect in order to use that effect again. And I think that's, well, you know, that's probably fine. They want to give you, like, a crutch, but they don't want to allow you to use it, like, over and over again. But the thing is that heart tanks and sub-tanks are also tied to Cyber Elves, and what's worse is that for those elves that give you, like, life upgrades and sub-tanks, you actually have to feed them a large amount of another resource called energy crystals, which are dropped by enemies throughout the game. But you need such a high number of energy crystals that it's actually kind of ridiculous. You have to grind quite a lot in order to get them. So anyways, moving on to this boss battle, I made a very poor jump cut, I apologize, because I actually died to this guy. So the thing to note about bosses in Mega Man Zero is that you notice that he's throwing out boomerangs. He will actually only do that if your rank is A or S. The bosses get new attacks when you get a high rank on the previous mission, which I don't really think was a good idea, but they do it 2 more times in the follow-up Mega Man Zero games. Because, like, you're basically making the game harder for people who get a high rank, and that's fine and all, like, if you want to make the game harder somehow, but there is a hard mode, so these new attacks could be, like, they could be made exclusive to that mode, if they wanted. So this guy's, so the boomerang attack is probably the hardest thing to dodge, besides the rolling attack because of all the bombs he spits out. That's really annoying. He's actually pretty difficult for how early in the game, like, you have to fight him. Actually, you don't even have to take on this mission at all for reasons I'll explain later, but this mission in particular, you don't have to do it first, but it's the mission that gives you weapons other than the Buster and Saber, so you probably want to do this so you can actually get them and, like, have more toys to play with. And yeah, I cut them in half again. Divided by 0. So yeah. Like, I really wish that they would give you the weapons for completing any mission, but no, you have to complete this in order to get the new weapons, and I will be using them. There are uses for the new weapons. Oh, and we have a Metroid style, like, you kill the boss, now the area is going to self-destruct. The annoying thing about self-destructing this area is that you lose access to it entirely, which means that if you didn't pick up those 2 Cyber Elves, then you have to actually wait for New Game Plus in order to come back here and actually have a chance of picking them up. But it does unlock another Cyber Elf that you can come back and get if you want. I don't do it. So yeah, that's the end of that mission. And I've gotten the first Saber level up from slashing at those doors. Another annoying thing about having the weapons level up as you use them is that you actually can't do the triple slash from the Mega Man X games until you've leveled up your sabers sufficiently. And that's very, you know, the triple slash is like one of the key tools in your toolbox as Zero, and to have you have to wait in order to use it, that can be kind of annoying. So after completing that mission, exit and take the elevator all the way down and then enter this room, and you can talk to the scientist here to pick up a new weapon called the Triple Rod, which is a spear of sorts. It has a couple of uses, but it's not really one of the best weapons ever. It's fun, but it's not good. It's a flawed weapon, but it's fun to use. So I will use it on occasion. In fact, the Triple Rod doesn't even return in 02 or 03. Like, for whatever reason, they keep, like, getting rid of one of your weapons, and I just accidentally talked to the girl. Unfortunate. But, yeah. So this next mission, another interesting thing about Mega Man Zero games is, well, for this first one, there are missions where the boss is not, like, an animal Reploid of some kind. Like, it's normally standard for Mega Man X to have animal Reploids as bosses, but, even for regular missions that aren't Fortress missions, like, they will sometimes throw out a boss that's not strictly an animal Reploid, which I think is pretty cool. It's good to have some of those on occasion. Alright, so this mission is supposedly taking place at a train station, but I don't know what train station has all of the train tracks completely wrecked. I guess it's been in disrepair. Again, this universe goes through so many apocalypses, it's not even funny. Alright, so you can actually slash those wires down with a saber if you want, but you just have to avoid the little spark and you'll be perfectly alright. You won't take damage. And there's a hidden little cavern up here with a life recover item and a Cyber Elf, in case you were in need of something like that. I actually don't use a lot of the Cyber Elves, even when I want to, like, have a crutch to lean on. The only really good Cyber Elves are the health recovery Cyber Elves. Like, there are ones that'll save you from a pit, and ones that'll add more time to a timer. Those are okay and all, but this series, like, I guess it's pushing you to do better and better, and, like, get good at the actual game. So, like, eventually you'll get to the point, if you play this enough, where you don't really need the Cyber Elves at all. Except for accidents, I guess. Like, I still use the health recovery Cyber Elves on some missions. Alright, so, the train is going to start moving, and we have a limited amount of time to grab the Cyber Elf and that's on board and then get out. So this will be interesting. And I finally got the fully charged Charge Shot. So now I'm going to talk about elemental weaknesses, because those are a thing in this game. Bosses do not have traditional weapon weaknesses because you aren't, like, taking enemy weapons and stuff. But they are weak against elements, which I guess is a little bit better than just having, like, a weakness chain or something. But you'll see that the fully charged Charge Shot with the Thunder Chip equipped actually trivializes this boss. Elemental weaknesses trivialize bosses in this series. And, you know, I would prefer, like, just beating them without the elemental weaknesses, but you have such little room for error that it's actually, like, to your benefit to still kind of use these because it's safer that way. So yeah, this boss's gimmick is that he has a flamethrower up front, and he'll try and shove you into the spiked ceiling. And he is supposed to inch closer and closer towards you so that the flamethrower is more of a threat, but he wasn't doing that really. Also, I almost got smashed into the spike wall, but that didn't happen. There's actually enough space up there for you to dash away if you do get caught. So you have like a little window for getting away from the spiked ceiling. Anyways, yet another Cyber Elf that we're not going to use. You just get so many of these, it's crazy. So, what was I going to talk about? I guess something that's worth talking about is 1-ups, because... Oh yeah, I'm actually going to go and get another weapon. After completing another mission, after, like, beating the elephant boss, then you can come back here and get another weapon called the Shield Boomerang, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a shield that you throw like a boomerang. So in case anyone was not yet convinced that Western media is something that Japan just loves, now we've got Captain America. I mean, we had Wolverine with Sigma in X2, and we had Star Wars all over X1. Now we've got Captain America. And actually, Sigma had an attack like that in X3, but whatever. So I'm taking on the factory mission a little earlier than I normally would. Like, this is something that people normally wait to do because it's actually pretty tough. Like, this is one of the missions where you actually want to have a Cyber Elf that saves you from bottomless pits, for reasons that you'll see coming up. So the path that I'm taking through here is not really the normal path. There's a semi-stealth section that you would have to go through, I think. But if you take the upper path, then you can just break in this way. It's a lot easier. And you pick up a 1-up. So the thing about 1-ups in this game is that you do not get any 1-ups back if you lose them all. Like, if you are down to 1 life and you begin a new mission, you've got 1 life for that mission. And that's really annoying because, like, people might have to use their extra lives, but maybe they wouldn't because there are actually no checkpoints in most stages before the boss doors. Like, the boss doors for most stages are going to be your only checkpoint. So, extra lives, like, you know, it's silly. It's a complete waste to die before the boss door because then you've used that life for nothing. Especially if you had to use a Cyber Elf to get here. This is the annoying section, by the way, because you've got platforms that are actually destructible if you hit them in the wrong way. And you're flying over a bottomless pit, and if you want to get any of the goodies, like the extra Cyber Elves, the 1-ups, things like that, then you have to leave the platform, and the screen size for the GBA is very small. So for Mega Man Zero, like, it's very difficult to see what's below or above you because the vertical screen size is not that good. So yeah, just a lot of, like, little annoyances coming together to make a very hard game. And another thing is, oh, we have a boss coming up here, and free energy crystals for some reason. This is going to be the first boss where I use the triple rod. Not that it's, like, a really stupidly good weapon for this or anything, but it's just easier to hit this guy because you can stand beneath his weak point and then stab upwards with the triple rod. The triple rod is a spear that you can thrust in any direction you like. And I forgot the pattern for this brief moment here, but I'm going to figure out the pattern very quickly here. And actually finish this fight with a very low amount of health left. It was actually pretty tense moment for the playthrough, I must say. So yeah, his attacks are not that difficult to avoid once you've seen them, because he always uses them in a fixed order. I don't really know what his attack is that he only uses when you're A rank, but yeah, just because I've never really completed this game with an S rank or anything. Like, the ranking is very unforgiving. Like, it will actually penalize you for using Cyber Elves or losing lives. But the thing is, there are Cyber Elves that have permanent effects, like the Heart Tanks that I mentioned. If you use those, then you're getting penalized on every mission thereafter. And because of New Game Plus, it's actually possible to use so many Cyber Elves with permanent effects eventually that you will eventually lose the ability to A-rank anything at all. Also, this attack isn't even lethal. I didn't realize that. So yeah, and considering there's a Cyber Elf with a rank requirement that I already showed off, like, maybe it's possible to lose out on 100% completion permanently, but who knows. Anyways, getting back to 1-ups, the thing about 1-ups is that if you lose all of your lives, you actually have the ability to skip the mission entirely by giving up. And you can also escape the mission and then give up, which means you can skip any mission you want, with the only caveat being that you forfeit any rewards that would have been in the mission, like this. The flame chip, the second elemental chip, is actually a reward for completing the factory mission. So if I had given up on this mission, I would not have the flame chip, and certain bosses, I would not be able to exploit their elemental weaknesses, which, again, this doesn't seem like the best thing in the world, and I'm not really sure why. But now that we have the flame chip and the shield boomerang, we're going to do the first desert mission, and the flame chip and the shield boomerang are very good against the boss of this mission, so that's pretty cool. And they like this desert too, because there are no less than 4 missions with that take place here in the desert, or at least at first. There's actually a hidden base underneath the desert that we will be getting to in a little while. I actually like that they contextualize the missions, like they actually tell you a little bit about what's going on in the mission that you're supposed to find, because we are actually in this mission. Oh, by the way, these falling blocks, they don't respawn ever until you do a New Game Plus, so it's actually possible to miss that Cyber Elf too. Cyber Elves, once they are freed from their little canisters or whatever, they will actually gradually float towards 0, so that's helpful for collecting them. And also, that little bear trap had a Cyber Elf in it? Seriously? And that dragon head enemy had a Cyber Elf too? This is getting a little bit nuts, don't you think? Anyways. So let's see, where was I? I've completely forgotten what I'm talking about, so I guess I'll talk about this, obstacle that we have to face. It is a tornado generating thing. You basically have to shoot with a buster. You have to get into a very small window in order to hit it. Anyways, we're up to the boss, so I guess we can talk about this. It's an Anubis robot. That's fun. So what we're going to do is equip the shield boomerang. This, by the way, this is the only weapon in the game that you don't have to level up in order to use the charge attack. So you can see that it throws out the boomerang, and that's really cool. It's actually a really cool weapon. Like, the shield part isn't super helpful, but there are other facets to it that are very helpful, like the charge attack. Because you can stand right here and hit him from a very safe location, and as long as he attempts to summon more of those robot zombies, which I don't know how he's doing that. I guess when the little ship... I guess when the shuttle crashed over the desert, it caused... He's actually raising the dead robots or something, but that doesn't make much sense. So, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about it. Oh yeah, I was saying about how the missions are contextualized. I actually like that this mission has a little bit of story to it, because a shuttle crashed over the desert and it has a bunch of our allies in it. And we're sent out here to look for a survivor, but the annoying thing is, of course, that you have to escort him all the way back to the base. There's a health recovery item and then a 1-up if you want to go and collect those to make this a little bit easier. Of course, I was already almost at full health anyways, but you have to escort this guy back. And he's slow, so he's you have to go at his pace, not at your pace. And if he gets hit by anything too much, he can actually die. And that will cost you a life as well, for some reason. But the thing is that you'd think there would be more than just one survivor, right? Well, when we get to the hidden base under the desert later, it turns out that the enemy actually took all of the survivors from the shuttle crash as prisoners. So that was actually a pretty interesting bit of continuity between missions, I think. And these missions are all unlocked in a tree as well, so that's cool too. Of course, it does make me wonder what happens if you decide to give up on certain missions. Like, do certain missions just not become available? Like, I guess I could worry about it later, but there's a second mission at the factory where I guess if you give up the factory mission, then obviously you won't have control of the factory, and there's be no reason to protect the factory because that's the purpose of the mission. Anyways, destroying that little quicksand generator is a good idea on your way into this area, so that you don't have to deal with the quicksand when you are escorting the soldier back to the base. Because then you will have to deal with him getting caught in the bear traps. Like, this could happen here. I should have destroyed... Or is he immune to the bear traps? Well, I guess I'm not immune to the bear traps, so I'm just going to destroy them myself anyways, and I need the Saber EXP because I focused so much on the charge shot for the Buster that I have neglected leveling my Saber, and there's actually a charge attack for the Saber that uses the elemental chips as well. So there's that. Anyways, it's a good thing you can destroy the projectiles from those dragon heads, because otherwise they would probably hit our poor innocent soldier here. And seriously though, one soldier? Well, I guess the resistance that is fighting against X and his armies, they have to save every last soldier they can because they don't exactly have the numbers to deal with all this. The reason X is, like, has it in for all of the Reploids is because there's actually been a bit of an energy shortage. And X figured that the solution to the energy shortage would be to just, like, eliminate the Reploids so that that would cull the population and make it so that we need less resources. So yeah, X has gone more than a little bit crazy. I wonder how that happened. You know, you'd think X would be a good guy after all that fighting he did. Anyways, this mission, like, I'm not sure what triggers this mission in particular, but partway through the game you will have this mission where a giant mechanoloid is dropped in and starts attacking the base. But this mechanoloid is very, very vulnerable to the triple rod. Because this is actually the most hilarious thing about the triple rod. You can use it as a pogo stick. Now, this is going to be awesome. Look at this. This is nuts. I love the triple rod just for the pogo stick ability. Like, it may not be that great of a weapon for all of its other attacks, but the triple rod's pogo stick ability is the best part, and that really trivializes the first two parts of the giant mechanoloid. The way you destroy this is by destroying its 3 weak points, which is the missile launcher on top, the little thing that's spewing out bombs, and this thing that is shooting out spinning top bombs for some reason. Is Top Man in there? Has Top Man come back from revenge? Anyways, after all 3 of those are destroyed, the enemy commander pops out of the whatever that thing is, and you can just pogo stick on top of him as well. An annoying thing about this boss, however, is that you have to actually let it make progress towards the base and break through a certain part of the level in order to unlock a secret Cyber Elf and a 1-up. So, actually, I don't think it's a Cyber Elf. I think it's just a 1-up, but it might be a Cyber Elf. I haven't let it get that far in a long time, so I don't really know for sure. So with that guy out of the way, we can continue with the regular missions, and our next objective is that hidden base under the desert that I talked about, because completing this mission will get us the 3rd elemental chip, the Ice Chip. And yeah, you gotta have all those elemental chips, because especially the Ice Chip, because I want to show a certain boss get completely trivialized with the Ice Chip. We'll see what that's all about. Anyways, you drop down through here, and there's a section coming up that I don't really like. I mean, there's this hidden Cyber Elf in a secret part of the wall there. That's fine. But now we have instant death spikes. Mega Man 01 uses spikes very, very sparingly, which I am happy about, but you know, I don't like going through that because I feel like I have to slow down in order to avoid hitting the spikes. Now, Mega Man 02, I've played that, and it uses spikes very, very liberally, and I always got annoyed by that. There's not even a Cyber Elf that can save you from spikes. I mean, you can... there's one Cyber Elf in 01 that will eliminate all spikes throughout the game, but you have to feed it a lot of energy crystals to do that. So yeah, they've got Cyber Elves that will save you from pits that you don't have to spend crystals on, but spikes, yeah, whatever. Pardon me. This is another annoying part of the game. In this mission, you have to rescue the prisoners, and every time you free one of them, they have a little bit of dialogue, and the annoying part is that there are enemies that are searching for you, and if you're caught, you will get an alert. Like, it's like a stealth game, apparently. I don't know why they did that. But if you get caught in an alert, the gates to the prison cells will be blocked off, so you can't free the prisoners quite yet until the alert goes down. And stronger enemies will also spawn, and here's a secret health recovery item and a mysterious door. I wonder what that's for. We're not going to find out in this playthrough, actually. So yeah, just destroy the enemies before they see you, and then free all of these guys, and watch out for enemies pretending to be prisoners, because that's a thing in this mission, too. So, there was one thing I wanted to talk about before we get to the boss of this mission, and that is how the combo system works, because you know that if you have the triple slash combo, you should in theory be able to hit 3 times with it, right? And then the boss will get invincibility frames, but for some reason that seems to work a little bit differently in 0-1. In 0-2 and 3, it's fine. You know, looking at that laser blocking the prison cell, it makes me wonder why they don't just stay up permanently. Then we'd never be able to free the prisoners. But getting back to the combo system, I'm not really sure how it works in 0-1. I've always favored the single hits that do big amounts of damage versus lots of smaller hits that you can string together for 0-1. For 0-3, it might be more beneficial to use the triple slash combo than the charged attacks, but I've always preferred the charged attacks for 0-1. Anyways, the reason I wanted to say that is because we can actually abuse the way the combo system works with the shield boomerang and the Z-Saber, and you're going to see that on this upcoming boss. In order to use this strategy on the boss, it takes a little bit of luck because he has to move in a very specific way, but I got it for this playthrough, which made me very happy. I was very happy to be able to do this. We just have to wait until the alarms go off, and then we will be able to show that off. So I'll explain how it works briefly before it happens. What you do is you hold out the shield boomerang and then you rapidly tap the saber button. What this does is that holding up the shield will cancel the animation of the saber slash, allowing you to slash again and again very quickly, and the single hit from the saber will actually give the boss not so many invincibility frames. So yeah, you're gonna see it coming up right here. You don't need to wish me good luck, CL, because, well, actually, wishing me good luck is fine, because, as I said, you need a little bit of luck, because Blizzard Buffalo here, I guess that's who he is. Actually, yeah, this is what's happening. He has to do that specific attack very close to the wall, but you can just shred him instantly. I am so glad I got that to happen, because not only did it save time, it looks pretty awesome, too. Probably got me some Saber EXP as well. So that's another good use of the Shield Boomerang. And the Shield Boomerang stays around in 0-2 and 3. Unfortunately, it was lost in 0-4, which made me so very sad. Right, so talking about the fact that you can skip any mission in the game that you want. I'm going to skip these 4 missions here. The bosses for them are just kind of a little bit difficult. Like, I wouldn't say they're super difficult, but I'm just going to grab one Cyber Elf in this mission, and then we're going to skip the mission completely. I really don't think it's a good idea to allow the player to just skip missions like this, because it's actually possible to skip all the way to the end game. Like, there's another mission in the desert that I'm going to briefly enter just to escape it. If you skip that mission, then the game instantly moves to the end game missions, which you just miss out on so much that it's going to be even more annoying for a new player. And if a new player decides to give up after losing all of their lives, then they're actually going to only have 1 life for the next mission, and they're probably going to give that up too. So yeah, sticking to tradition a little bit would have been fine, I think, but it lets me complete this game in less than an hour for the purposes of this video. So for that very strange obsession I have with completing these games in less than an hour, that's good for me, so that's okay. Alright, so here's where they kind of drop the bomb that CL, this scientist human, she did not, in fact, resurrect Mega Man X. She actually made a copy of Mega Man X. And that's the reason why X has been acting like a tyrant this entire time, because he's actually a flawed copy of X instead of the real deal. In the original draft for the plot of this game, it was going to be the real Mega Man X, who had, I guess, lost his mind after so long, all of that fighting and stuff that he had to do. But I suppose that wouldn't really make sense, because when Dr. Light made Mega Man X, he specifically ensured that X would never do something like that. So, yeah. Also, the elemental chips have an effect on the regular enemies, by the way. That was an example of that. But I usually just kill the enemies so quickly that it doesn't really matter too much. Coming up is a boss that I kind of like. He is He's one of the rare examples of a boss that spawns minions that can drop a Cyber Elf, which means that you are at the mercy of RNG if you want to collect that Cyber Elf, or you just have to drag out the fight for so long. Another annoying thing about him is that he has this rod in his little animation here, right? Well, he doesn't use that because the attack involving the rod is exclusive to players who have an A or S rank, and I've always thought that was just the dumbest thing. Also, those little minions like to latch on to you and explode. So yeah, this guy is based on Sun Wukong from Journey to the West, in case you were wondering, which means this is the second Mega Man boss to be based on Sun Wukong, because you have Buster Rod G from Mega Man The Wily Wars. I should play Wily Wars at some point. Anyways, this guy is called Hanu Machine. The only reason I remember that boss name is because I looked up the origin of the boss name. It's the word machine combined with a monkey Hindu god. So yeah, there you go. Not very difficult if you've fought this guy dozens of times, and luckily I have. So there you go. Right. So now we just have a little cutscene before the final 3 missions of the game. And I think these final 3 missions are, like, they just go way over the top with how difficult they are, because the first mission, it has 3 bosses in one, if you can believe it, and if you die at any point before the 3rd boss, you have to start all the way over again, and it's so awful. You have to be hardcore in order to win at Mega Man Zero. And another annoying thing about this first mission is, well, I'll save it until the thing comes up, but there's an annoying trap later on. It's so awful. Let's just say Inti Creates decided to resurrect a very bad Mega Man feature. That's what I'll say. Great music, though. This is one of the few songs in the soundtrack that I actually seriously like. Not that the music in the Zero games are bad or anything, but this is just one of the few songs that I actually fell in love with when I first heard it. Right, so we've got some basic enemies to start out with. There's some of these traps again. I thought you could make it through that jump there very quickly without getting hit, but the game proves me wrong very regularly. Alright, so we have some moving platforms. This can be a little bit annoying because, I don't think the platform spawns until it comes on screen, which means it can start moving at a very inopportune time if you mess up the spawning. Here's the first of the 3 bosses. A pair of flying Reploids over a pit of spikes. And, these are fine, I think. They don't really have a name, or at least I don't remember the name. Have I mentioned, by the way, that Mega Man Zero bosses have increasingly stupid names as the series goes on? It just gets worse and worse. I only remember Hanu Machine because it's, it rolls right off the tongue. But for other bosses, I guess the next one is called Asura Basura. That's decent enough to remember. But then you have things like Anubis Necromantis and, Maha, whatever the elephant boss was. Just look these up if you want to, go crazy with how stupid they are. It's crazy. You couldn't stick to the X1 simplicity of adjective animal, spark, mandrill, chill, penguin. This guy is annoying. So yeah, this boss isn't really that difficult. I don't know why I have such a tough time with him, but his weakness is electricity. And it might look like he's invincible during that spinning attack, but you can actually hit him in the head with a well-placed buster shot. So yeah. You've probably noticed by now that I'm using a lot. Oh, I'm just gonna play this safe because the next hit will kill me and send me back to the beginning of the stage. I don't want that. So you might have noticed that I'm using the Buster quite a lot. At some point or another, I probably should have started leveling the Saber, because now would be a really good time to have that charged Saber attack, but whatever, we'll have to stick with the Buster for now. Very courteous of them to put a health recovery item outside that boss's chamber, though, because now we have the return of the worst Mega Man feature in history, the Disappearing Bricks. And these aren't as bad as the one all the way back in Heatman stage when they became famous, but seriously, Disappearing Bricks that shoot at you? Inti Creates. Don't pull an Arika. Don't copy stuff from old Mega Man just because it's famous, and like being famous doesn't mean it's good game design. Like, fortunately, this is the only real example of Inti Creates doing this. Arika did it a lot more in network transmission. Oh yeah, and of course, if you fall off the disappearing bricks, then you have to start all the way back at the beginning, and you have to climb up them all over again. This is really the only poor section of the stage, I would feel. Well, you know, it's a pretty lengthy stage, but the non-boss portions are okay, and I don't like that there's basically no checkpoints before the boss doors for the third boss, but still, yeah. This is the only really bad part of the stage, is what I'm trying to say, and probably tripping over my words a lot, because this is all live commentary. I'm just, well, actually not really live. I'm rewatching the recording, the edited recording, but yeah. Alright, so here we have another animal Reploid. It is a... what kind of beetle is this again? I think he's a Hercules beetle. Yeah, Japan really likes pairs of characters who are beetles, one being a stag beetle and the other being a Hercules beetle. It's a interesting little thing that they do. I mean, they do it in a bunch of games. They did in X with Boomer Kwanger and Gravity Beetle, and I'm not even talking about the boss. I should probably talk about this boss. He's not that difficult, especially since you probably have some form of charged attack, and you probably have the ice chip by now too, assuming you aren't skipping missions. Like the speedrun in this game, the any % speedrun skips all the way to the end without leveling anything, besides using one trick in the intro stage that lets you level the saber a lot. So yeah, this is the first true checkpoint. You are allowed to exit the area and save before starting on the second stage, but who needs to save? I can handle this. I've got like 4 1-ups still remaining. Alright, so stage 2 of Neo Arcadia is annoying. It starts with one of the worst things you could have brought back from the X series, a long and boring drawn-out elevator sequence. I have no idea why the X series loved these so much, and I have no idea why Inti Creates decided to create one of them for Mega Man Zero, but here you are, another long, boring, drawn-out elevator sequence. Like, who designed this? Did Copy X design this? Because I'm starting to think that well, it would make a lot of sense if Copy X designed this, because he probably thought that the Mavericks of old were doing it right when they actually weren't. You can't bore your enemies to death like this. It doesn't work that way. Anyways, we have a section coming up with moving platforms and spikes everywhere. This is a section that I'm not a huge fan of because it reminds me of the moving platform sections from Mega Man 2, which is probably another sign of, like, Inti Creates. I ragged on them a lot just now, but they're good developers. Don't take that as me ragging on them a lot. This is their first rodeo, so, like, you know, it's expected that they would make a few mistakes. And even, I don't even think Mega Man Zero 2 is that great a follow-up. I actually think Zero 3 is the best of the Zero series, which from what I hear is a very common opinion. So that's a good sign. That's a sign that they managed to make a very good game eventually. Not flawless, but eventually they came out with something very fantastic. And, you know, I should say at this point that the Zero series has very fast-paced and smooth gameplay, so they've got that going for them. I just think it's like way too difficult. Like, forcing me to grind all those energy crystals for the heart tanks and sub-tanks was not a good idea. And to their credit, in Zero 2, they start hiding the sub-tanks normally so that they aren't tied to Cyber Elves anymore, which is a very good change. So my assessment of Zero 1 is that it's a flawed first time out, but it's really a great foundation for the rest of the series. Anyways, apparently this boss is too big to be a slug. That's what Zero said. I don't really know why he said it. But this boss, even though it's supposed to be a successor of sorts to the Yellow Devils from the old Mega Man games, this is actually a really easy boss to trivialize, at least without his A or S rank attack. I don't know if he has one. But when he is bouncing around like this, a very easy way to avoid him is to hide in one of the corners and then jump into the corner when he starts splitting up. You don't want to shoot him in the middle of that attack because it will mess up his positioning and make it harder to dodge his other attacks. You want him to be in one of the corners. So, unfortunately, I kind of goofed there, so it's going to be just a little bit more difficult. But as you can see, when he starts splitting up, he cannot bounce high enough to hit you in the top right or top left corners of the room. But he can hit you if he starts from the very center of the room, for example. So yeah, just that can make this a long boss battle, but it's at the very least one that you can trivialize if you want to make this a little bit easier. At the very least, if you die to this guy, this is the only boss in the second Neo Arcadia stage. So at the very least, if you die to him, you'll at least be right outside the boss doors for round 2. And then you can use what you learned from round 1. It's actually a pretty okay fortress boss. Right then, so, not really sure if there's much else to talk about. He's not weak to any particular element. He's still got a bar of health left. So yeah, it's probably jarring to see enemies with so much health because you have, like, these giant enemy health bars, which is another thing that makes Mega Man Zero much harder than the X games. But as I mentioned in one of my X playthroughs, where X's very small health bar is meant to represent that he is an old robot compared to modern Reploids, that goes for Zero as well, like in spades. But since Zero is still, well, Zero, he can beat anybody. I mean, I'm convinced he can beat basically anybody. I mean, like, he's cheated death at this point in the series, like, 3 times, I think. Depending on how you want to look at it, because there is that continuity problem with X5, X6, and X7. Anyways, that guy is finally done. We pick up yet another Cyber Elf that we are probably not going to use. And hello, Ciel, you've teleported into the beginning of the final stage. How did she do that? Is she like Data from Mega Man Legends? She can just teleport to the final boss room, and so she can save your game right before you enter? Yeah, that's probably it. Anyways, moving on to the final stage. The final Neo Arcadia stage and the final battle of the game is going to be a short hallway, or a couple of short hallways, divided up by, get this, boss refights. We still have boss refights. So this is going to be fun. And they've chosen some very weird bosses to refight because there were a lot of bosses throughout the game, but there are only 8 that you have to refight. And one of them is the guy that was serving as a fortress boss not 5 seconds ago. So that is actually very weird. We get to fight this guy 2 times in the span of a couple of seconds. Very interesting. Like, they don't make you refight Aztec Falcon, who was the boss of the Disposal Sensor at the beginning of the game, probably because he only has 1 health bar. But they do make you refight this guy, even though you fought him just a few moments ago. And they don't make you refight Hanu Machine, which is also very strange, but I think they wanted to not have... I think they wanted to have 4 bosses, 1 weak to each of the elemental chips, and 1 that is not weak to any particular chip, but unfortunately, there are 2 bosses weak to the flame chip, which would be the Anubis guy and the Blizzard Buffalo knockoff. So yeah. We're going to fight this guy the same way we did with the Shield Boomerang. I think it's worth mentioning at this point that there is in fact a hard mode to this game. The hard mode, I don't know if it affects enemy damage or enemy health, but what it does affect is it does not let you level up any of your weapons, which means that a Shield Boomerang is going to get used a lot more because it's the only weapon in hard mode that can exploit elemental weaknesses because you don't have to level it up for its charge shot. And I honestly thought that was a stupid thing because, like, you know, just taking away the tools in your toolbox isn't a good way to increase the difficulty in my view. So what they should have done for hard mode was, like, maybe make them always use their rank AS attacks. Like, that would have at least shaken up the bosses for the second playthrough for hard mode players. But in order to see those attacks, normally you have to, like, do almost perfectly and maintain an A or S rank. So, you know, it's weird to develop those attacks and then just have the bosses, like, not use them, like, not never ever use them because the very first mission is easy to get an A rank on. But, yeah, I don't think a lot of players are going to see the A or S rank attacks for every boss. We're going to see if the Blizzard Buffalo knockoff decides to do the move that makes it very easy to shred him. He jumps, and he's unfortunately... Oh, yeah, that's what he's going to do. So, yeah. And the very good news is that I have finally gotten the charged Saber Slash, so that's good. It was good to get it here while I still could. I also just realized that none of these bosses in this room are Like, they all have a weakness. There's no null elemental boss. Like, they could have made this guy the null elemental boss, and then brought back Hana Machine instead of the Blizzard Buffalo guy. Like, I don't even remember what his real name is, so I'm just comparing him to Blizzard Buffalo. It's inevitable. There is a boss in Mega Man 03 that I always refer to as Renamon because I don't know if these guys have any gender, but there is a fox boss that resembles Renamon, so I always call him that. So anyways, oh, you can actually, I didn't point this out, but when he does the cannonball attack, you can actually slice him off with the saber. But I don't see why you would do that, because it's easier to just dash under him. Oh yeah, when you use the charged saber slash, it doesn't split the enemy in half. I've always thought that was very disappointing, because yeah, it's a saber attack. It should slice him in half, but it doesn't if you finish him off with it, so that's very unfortunate. There's a bit of a secret passageway coming up here. It leads to a health recovery item and a 1-up. I've actually never used a sub-tank in 0-1, but I have used them in 2 and 3, and they are very, very powerful in 2 and 3, so I'm actually wondering if the sub-tanks in 0-1 are as powerful as they are in 2 and 3. So that'll be something interesting to make a note of if you ever manage to get one of the sub-tank elves and then feed it all of those energy crystals. It needs like 1,200 crystals. Like, you can probably see that I don't even have that many crystals. So all of these bosses, these are the bosses I skipped previously. These are the X-Guardians. They are the personal guard of Mega Man X, and they are all complete wussies. Well, except one of them, but we'll get to him later. This first guy is called Fafnir, after some kind of legendary dragon, I think, but he's actually the toughest of the 4, I would say. Well, actually second toughest. Because even though he's weak to the Thunder Chip, like I'm using right here, his attacks are very difficult to avoid. They're fast, they come out powerful, and they're a little bit difficult to predict as well. And his arena is also a very wide open arena, which can cause trouble. Like, fortunately, he managed to spam the same attack over and over there, so that was very easy. But with wide open arenas like that, you've got to keep in mind that your Buster doesn't travel all the way across the arena. It eventually stops, like, after going off screen for a little bit. Next up is Splash Woman. That's who everybody compares Leviathan to. Like, I guess somebody, like, you have to keep in mind that the bosses for the classic Mega Man games are selected through a contest, so in order for Splash Woman to actually be based on Leviathan, her original designer would have had to have been thinking of Leviathan, but it's very easy to imagine Inti Create selecting Splash Woman for Mega Man 9 based on, like, memories of Leviathan. You can see that she was very easy to deal with the charged flame ship attacks, even though she's underwater and you're using fire underwater. A very rare example of an underwater boss battle at any rate. So next up is Harpooya, who is the most pathetic robot master ever. Springman has nothing on Harpooya. Because when you hit her with her elemental weakness, I just said her, didn't I? Harpooya is actually a man. Even though that voice clip is probably making you think otherwise. But yeah, you can see that it's very easy to loop Harpooya's AI. And this guy is supposed to be the leader of the X-Guardians. Well, I guess it's worth noting that he uses Aztec Falcon as a mount in 0, 2, and 3, so that's funny. So yeah, so much for that guy. Yeah, you'll never forget this humiliation. I have no idea why he's such a prominent character. He was so awful. The real challenge of the X-Guardians is Phantom, who I am told has a design that is actually based on a character from an earlier Inti Creates game, so that's pretty cool. So anyways, this attack pattern should be familiar if you've seen the secret boss in Rockman Minus Infinity. Yeah. So, one of the reasons he's difficult is because he has no AI loop, he has no elemental weakness, so you've got to take this guy down with your raw skill alone. And his attacks are very fast as well. Like, when he charges at you and tries to hit you with his saber, that's a very difficult thing to see coming. You've got to stay very far away from him if you want to predict it. But you can knock him out of it, which is a very cool thing. And this cloning attack, you just gotta look for the image of him that looks different from the others, and don't attack the other ones because that will trigger his counter attack. So yeah. once you... This actually stopped me on hard mode for a long time because, like, I didn't have any charged attacks because hard mode doesn't let you level up your weapons, and he had no elemental weakness to exploit. But yeah, that's a very tough boss. You really have to learn his pattern. What? What just happened? What? You can't do that! That's illegal! So yeah, he has a self-destruct attack that he uses exclusively in the refight, and if you're at low health, it could potentially kill you, but he still counts as defeated, so we can still move on. But yeah, that's gotta be annoying if you actually fall for it. And, you know, I'd imagine some people would at least get hit, but depending on their health situation, that may not even be lethal, because that was actually a complete waste, actually, because even if the player gets hit and they weren't at low health, like, there's going to be a health recovery item, like, when you exit the room anyways. So, Phantom just sacrificed himself pointlessly, which means he can't appear in the next 2 games, except for a secret rematch in 0-3. So yeah, we're down 1 X-Guardian. That's unfortunate. So here we are, Copy X. Finally, the final battle of this game. Gonna notice some video editing here because it took a couple of tries, because this guy has 2 forms and you have to take them down both in a row. And depending on how many 1-ups you've collected, this could be one of the toughest stages in the entire game, because you have to endure so many battles with the boss rematches and X himself, who is just this first form of him where he uses what's actually the ultimate armor from X4, and a bunch of attacks from throughout the X games. Like, that was Shotgun Ice just now. Like, don't tell me otherwise. That's just how I think of it. But once you learn his pattern, he's not so difficult. The real challenge comes from the second form, because now X is about to invoke the angel motif that is very prominent in X8 for some reason. So yes. What can be said about this guy? Well, you have to hit him in the head, and you have to climb onto those 2 pillars that conveniently just dropped in order to hit him there. This Halo attack, if you get caught by it, it will stun you for a couple of seconds, which is usually followed up by a wave of flames across the ground, so watch for that. This laser attack is the worst part of it, because it's very difficult to avoid. You have to misdirect it, if that's even possible. But if you stay on the walls here... Actually, is this platform wider than the one on the left? Interesting. So yeah, if those 2 platforms weren't even there, then you actually couldn't physically beat this, because you wouldn't be able to reach high enough to hit him. So yeah, that would have probably been smarter, Copy X. I can see why you're just a copy, because you're not as intelligent. So yeah, charge saber attacks, that'll get you through this fight. Just leap at his head and slash while you're falling. Just make sure you don't jump too early, because you might run into the flames if they're still there. And I had to use like 2 Cyber Elves on this. It was very, like, I was totally I thought I was going to fall into the flames right here, so that's why I used the Cyber Elf. But yeah, I was able to dash away in time, but I still got hit, so it's cool. And that's the end of Mega Man 01. Copy X is destroyed, which will totally not lead to a power vacuum in Neo Arcadia. So, what do I think of Mega Man 01? Well, I think it oversteps the bounds of what could be considered a fair challenge, and it would be nice if you didn't have to feed Cyber Elves in order to get heart tanks and sub-tanks and stuff, but the gameplay is still very fast, very smooth. The weapons are interesting to use. It was interesting to have a game where you don't take enemy weapons, you instead just consistently level up your own. And story-wise, it's kind of nice too. I mean, like, story has never been a big part of Mega Man, but, you know, they keep inching forward and forward. Baby steps towards interesting video game plots. And yeah. So yeah, that's Mega Man 01. A game that I had as a kid that I played quite a lot, and I got really good at it, so I'm happy I was able to show you a decent playthrough of it. Also, we don't need to see these credits, we're just going to fast forward through all of them. C rank at the end of it, I guess that's nice. So yeah, that's Mega Man 0, I'm Ephraim225, and I'll see you next time for whatever I do next.